Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is physically located at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information and to view our forums on our website, you can go to the website at www.austinuu.org. This time, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our speakers today are Louis Conway and Annette Price. Mr. Conway spent 2,095 days in Texas prisons and 4,012 days on parole. Today, he is the criminal justice organizer with Grassroots Leadership and Texas Advocates for Justice, a nonprofit organization that works for a more just society where prison profiteering, mass incarceration, deportation, and criminalization are things of the past. As an organizer, activist, and advocate, Louis led the legislative lobbying effort to protect the Austin Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. Louis has served on many successful campaigns, the repeal of the Austin Juvenile Curfew Ordinance, delaying the new $97 million jail expansion in Travis County, and he also led a prison closure campaign, which contributed to the closing of 3 private correctional facilities and 1 public prison in 2017. He is currently involved with several community organizations that support formerly incarcerated people, including Greater Mount Zion, Second Chance Democrats, and Reentry Advocacy Project. He is an African-American U.S. national who holds an Associate of Arts degree in Applied Science. Louis is passionate about breaking down barriers to reentry and enhancing opportunities to those who have experienced the sting of incarceration. Ms. Annette Price was raised by a single mother of 10 children in a small town in Indiana. At the age of 20, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 75 years in prison. After several appeal denials, her sentence was reduced to 40 years, citing the lower court erred by applying the extended term on a first offense. She was released from prison in 2005 after serving 20 years. Then she was released early on parole in 2008. While incarcerated, she obtained several degrees and earned 2 masters after incarceration. Today, she is the statewide coordinator for Texas Advocates for Justice and the founder CEO of Annette's Behind Me Transitional Living, a transitional home for women returning to Travis County from jail or prison. Let's welcome our speakers today.
Good afternoon. How are y'all doing?
Hello, everyone. How are you?
I don't know if I'm on or not. Y'all can tell me if I'm. Can y'all hear me? Mic check, mic check. Are we good on the mic? When I say people, y'all say power. People?
Power.
People?
Power.
I think they might be able to hear me a little bit.
I don't think they heard you, Louis.
Don't think they heard
One
me?
more time.
When I say people, y'all say power. People?
Power.
People?
Power.
So I'm used to talking to large groups of people, and so I'm kind of used to having a little energy when I get involved, so I need your help. As they said, we are members of Texas Advocates for Justice. We work at the intersection of criminal justice, mental health, and immigration. Right now, we know one of the leading causes of recidivism is folks not being able to find employment. And a great bit of our work has been providing access to opportunities. And so one of the things that we've encountered this year is the implementation of the rules for fair chance hiring. Who knows what fair chance hiring is?
Yay.
Good, good. How about ban the box? Who's heard of ban the box? Right, so what ban the box means is you take the portion of the application off that asks you about your background, that asks if you've been to prison. Fair chance hiring means that you don't do a background check until you offer that person a job. So we passed that ordinance in 2016. We are the first city in the South to have such an ordinance. But like with most governmental processes, there was it wasn't until 2018 that the rules enforcing that ordinance has gone into place. And so what we're finding is that there's a dearth of folks that don't know what fair chance hiring is. Employers and applicants alike, and of course the public. So we think this is a great opportunity to educate folks that may not be fully aware of the reverberating effects of incarceration and just how much that goes to disenfranchise folks politically, socially, economically, and also in just how large of an impact the employment has played. So I want you to think about the first time you applied for a job. And the first job I ever had was at Texas Turkey. It was down the street from my house. It was in a little like hut kind of thing. And all they sold was turkey. Like it was turkey everything. I found out what turkey fries were. If you know what turkey... And so one of the things that my dad told me when I went to apply for his job, he's like, I need you to be honest and tell them that you don't have any experience. I need you to tell the truth, and I need you to be dependable, right? I need you to show up when you say you're going to show up, right? So when you think about every time you've gone into a job situation, you know, you want to tell the truth on your job application. You want them to have the best impression of you, right? And so what we find out is that oftentimes we are sharing our most worst and judgmental moment on a piece of paper, right? So I went to prison for voluntary manslaughter. I got convicted when I was 22 years old. I am now 48 years old. I am 26 years removed from the incident that placed me in prison, and I am 18 years removed since my release from prison, yet I am 1 day removed from discrimination for employment, right? And so when we put our worst day first on the application, how inclined are you to be honest, right? How inclined are you to share your worst day of your life, and they want that first? Don't ask me about my best day. Don't ask me about, you know, what I've done in my community first. Ask me about my worst day that I've been judged for all my life. Let's do that first on a job application. And so the very first job I had when I came home from prison, it was a temporary position, and I was 30 years old. I had just done 8 years in prison. I had great 10 key skills. And when I applied for the job, they never asked about my background. Well, I didn't tell them, right? And since it was a temp job, they were assigning me at different places. And so I worked. Oh, man, I worked. I worked as hard as I've ever worked in my life. I'm fresh out of prison, so I can't afford not to have a job. So many of you may not know that employment is mandated when you're on parole. What that means is, in order for me to stay free, I have to stay employed. But the conundrum is, I'm unemployable. I have to be employed, but I'm unemployable. So when we find a job, when I tell you we work, we work. And so the first job I had, I worked 90 hours a week, right? And I moved up a tax bracket. And, you know, at the time I thought I wanted to be a rapper. So I was able to afford these things, my car, my studio time. Let's go back one though, I'm sorry. And I got engaged. But my supervisor, her name is Tina Leje. I was costing them so much money because I was working overtime that they hired me full time. Now, when they offered me that position, there was no way I was going to say no. I'm fresh out of prison. I'm like maybe a month or two out of prison. Of course I'm going to say yes to a full-time job. And so she believed in me, but in that believing in me, she also had to do a background check on me. And when she did the background check on me, she found out that I hadn't lied, I just hadn't told the truth either. So because I got hired through an account, a temp service, they didn't do a background check. And so the first thing she asked me was like, why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, if you knew my story, you would understand why I didn't tell you. So at the age of 21, I was charged with murder. At 22, I was convicted of manslaughter. At the age of 22, I was incarcerated for 20 years. I got out 8 years later, and I was released on parole at the age of 30. And at 43 years old, 22 years from there, I completed my obligation to the state. Now, 2006, I had a parole violation, and that's what that picture is there for. So between 1992 and 2000, I had no exposure to the job field. I had no exposure to asking how to encounter an interview process. And as a fact, during that whole time, I thought when I came home, the world was going to be accepting of me. I thought they would know that I served my time, I changed. Why wouldn't we give this person a job, right? And so, let Annette.
For me, my story is that at the age of 20, I was arrested for murder as a result of being raped and being beaten. So by the time I was 20, I was still 20, I was convicted of a murder. I was sentenced to 75 years in the beginning. By the age of 23, my sentence was reduced from 75 years to 40 because they gave me what was called the extended term. I had no idea what that meant, but the extended term was a phrase that they used if you have already been convicted in the past. But that was my first offense, so they couldn't give me the extended term, so they reduced it to 20. So I did 20 flat years incarcerated. I was released at the age of 40. And at 43, I was released off of parole. And just like Lewis said, in my bracket, that was from 1985 to 2005. I was in prison, so I had no idea about what society was. And I thought that when I got out, that I educated myself while I was incarcerated. I obtained several degrees there because I felt if I go to school, by the time I get out, I will at least have something to show for it, and I can use my knowledge of school, I can use my job assignments that I had to get employed. But unfortunately, that didn't work for me. I had all the shame and the stigma and the guilt from being incarcerated and then society changing. For me, it felt like 10 times for every year that I was incarcerated. So I didn't have any skills to get out because, again, I went in at 20 years old and came out at 40. So, the catch-22. So I have all of this education, right? And I thought that when I got out of prison, I'd be able to get a job. Everything would be over. I've served my time. I was released off parole early. So now I can go on with my life. But it doesn't work like that. I had a very good paying job here in Austin. On the application, it stated, have you been convicted in the last 7 years? Well, technically, at that time, my conviction had been over 22 years ago, so I can legally say no on the application because it was 22 years ago opposed to the 7 years on the application. So what is a person to do? Do I keep my job? Do I lose my job? Do I learn how to fight? So like our fine president said, I'm going to take action to ban the box. Ban the box was first started in the 1990s with a campaign that was started by All of Us or None, which is a national civil rights movement of formerly incarcerated individuals. And this campaign was to change the stereotypes of people that had conviction histories in their background. And by asking employers to judge me for who I am. Don't judge me because I have a background or because of what you see on the paper. When I come for a job interview, I want you to look at me and judge me for who I am that's sitting in front of you today and not my past. Louis?
So the reason why we need fair chance hiring is because when someone comes home from prison, there's a whole litany of issues that you deal with. You deal with the reluctance of being honest. You deal with the embarrassment of your conviction. You deal with the nervousness. I mean, even if you don't have a background, you're nervous applying for a job. Right? So imagine you've got this huge anchor behind you that you know is going to come up at some point. And so there's this automatic denial that happens. I remember when I went through a series of job interviews, and you could see the glaze on a person's face. And I'm like, yeah, we'll call you. We'll call you, right? And so you begin to feel this automatic denial as you are filling out the application. You're filling out the application. You're like, you know what? This is just another. But I'm going to do it because whoever will think that I'm at least trying. And so the self-trauma, go back one. So the self-trauma of applying to each of those jobs. And so we talk about trauma being one of the precursors to the drug use, and the drug use being one of the precursors to the criminality. But yet we come home from prison and we are self-traumatizing ourselves every time we fill out those applications, knowing that we're not going to have a chance, right? And so what that self-trauma does, it intensifies that stigma of an incarceration, that stigma of that scarlet letter of a conviction. And then you have somebody that's been convicted of murder or a violent crime or a sex offense, and that stigma is even heavier. That stigma is even more of an onus when it comes to you trying to move forward. And so the shame is what attacks our community. The shame is what attacks our families and our churches. When I came home from prison, my family was so ashamed of me that many people who knew my sister didn't even know that she had a brother. That's how intense that shame is. That even to this day, 20 odd years later, I meet people that know my sister and like, wow, I didn't know she had a brother. And that's how intense that stigma and that shame is. And so when we talk about a perpetual interest, how many of here has ever taken out a loan? How many of y'all got a loan on something, right? School, something, right? So imagine in the terms of that loan, they charge you interest, right? And the interest is paid until you pay off the principal. But once you pay off the principal, they start charging you interest, right? So imagine a loan agreement where you pay off the principal, but they still charge you interest. Well, that's what it's like when you're coming home from prison. We were sentenced as part of our punishment. But when we come home, we're still paying on the principal because we can't get housing, we can't get jobs. We're still trying to navigate relationship spaces. We're still trying to regain some sort of social agility. So there's layer after layer of reverberating consequences of incarceration that lead to barriers. And these barriers are the barriers that we not only come through with policy, but we come through barriers socially. We try to navigate spaces. Just being big and black is a barrier. Being big and black convicted of a crime, barrier, right? So there are so many barriers that we're dealing with that when you add on the scarlet letter of conviction, truly, what chance does a person have? All right, we can get past those. So there's three things that we deal with when we come with why people have a problem with fair chance hiring. It's public safety, it's fear, and it's cost. Y'all ready for this? So, public safety. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. 2.2 million Americans are currently incarcerated. There are 6.9 million people on probation or parole, and there are 100 folks released annually. Now, these are national numbers. Locally, we got 2,400 people returning back to Travis County on an annual basis from prison. Those 2,400 people need housing. They need treatment. They need counseling. They need employment. And so when you look at public safety through the lens of, I would prefer to have somebody employed living in my neighborhood than unemployed, then you really see the importance of employment beyond the moral aspect of it, beyond the fact that it just makes sense fiscally to make sure people have jobs, right? So it is cheaper to hire than to jail. In Texas, we're going to spend about $19,000 a year locking somebody up, right? That $19,000 a year could easily pay for someone a job. But when we spend so much money on incarceration, if we look at it, we have local police, we have state police, we have county police, we have federal police, we got secret police that watch the secret police. Then we got judges, we got DAs, we got prisons. So we have built a whole economy on crime. We have built a whole economy on criminalizing people and criminalizing neighborhoods and criminalizing communities. And so when we look at the cost effectiveness of hiring someone, we understand that not only does it save us as a community, it saves us as a nation to employ folks, because we're putting folks back on the tax rolls. We're putting folks in position that they can become what they call fortuitous citizens, right? Fear. False evidence appearing real. There's more powerful than money and safety, right? It's like, how dare I possibly hire somebody that might commit a crime while they're on my watch? What happens when the hands of the clock overlap, right? So are we going to live in fear that this person might do something? Or can we live in the assurance that this person really cares about their job and their freedom, and they're going to be the most dependable employee that you've ever had? So is it fear based upon, because the numbers say that with just 30 days of employment, we reduce recidivism by 23%. With just 30 days of employment. Can you imagine if we have the wherewithal to give people a career? What that would do to our whole criminal justice system? If we decide that if folks have been to prison, their background is what makes them eligible to be the best employee possible. And we change our mindset from fear to possibility. So what do you think? Is there a value in organizing and engaging folks who are directly impacted? Yeah? Sure. Why? Why do you think it's important to organize folks who are directly impacted?
Sorry. They know what the issues are. They've been there. They've experienced it. They can tell compelling stories and say, hey, this is...
But they don't have any education. How do they know what they're talking about?
Well, that seems like it was an education itself in going through that experience.
So why don't we look to people who have been involved with the issue for the answers? Why do we look to policymakers instead of the people?
The reason for involving people is they're more likely to get help because they're almost always in need of treatment, with the percentage of incarcerated people are in there for a crime having been committed under the influence of a drug.
So you think it makes sense to involve organizing folks who are directly impacted?
Located approach and be offered treatment.
Absolutely. Okay.
It also provides respect and acknowledgement of what these folks have been through and the experience that they've had, because there's wisdom, hopefully, in the experience that people have been through, and their input, along with policymakers and others in the community, can give us a much better picture of what needs to be done. It's a great force, people getting out of being incarcerated, joining together to create a great force for positive action.
So one lens I want you to think about and do is this. How many are familiar with reproductive rights? Do you think men make better reproductive allies or organizers? Allies, right? Because there's no way we could possibly understand what you go through as a woman, right? So you are closest to the problem. That means you are right next to the solution, right? So it's the same concept. There was somebody.
I think there's value in organizing and engaging folks that are directly impacted because it levels the playing field. If we look at our communities, many folks that are directly impacted by incarceration or mental health, they don't have the same pathway to gaining affordable housing or a certain privilege that many of us taking advantage of. So if you hire directly impacted people, you make a communal effort at evening the playing field where we can all collaborate to do things in a better way for each other.
So, as we said, Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance passed in Austin 2016. We're the first and still the only city in the South with a Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance. This is how we did it. When we organize, we identify a problem that is affecting a large swath of the population. Everyone that comes out of prison deals with discrimination on jobs. So that's not a problem that's specific to a small portion of the population. That affects everyone that comes out of prison. So now you have your why, and your why has to be bigger than your how. Right? Because if you concentrate on your how, we could have never done it. How are we going to move the whole city to agree that folks with backgrounds that I need a job, right? What do I deserve for a job? So your why has to be bigger. But C is what's most important, is that it was led by directly impacted folks. Folks that had dealt with discrimination, folks that had been turned down for jobs, folks that had been trying to feed their kids, and I'm going to tell you, they wouldn't give me a job at Walmart. They wouldn't give me a job at McDonald's. They wouldn't give me a job at Burger King. As a matter of fact, my wife would tell you, I had to go to work overnight at 7-Eleven because that was the only shift that they felt safe in hiring me in. I'm 26 years removed from my crime, and I'm still considered a danger. This is our why, was to gain power. Now don't get that confused by what we mean by power. We don't mean power to overthrow, we mean power to be self-determining, right? And so if we are beginning to impact the policies that are directly impacting us and that have consistently have a direct impact on our lives, then we have to begin to crystallize a form of power that is going to impact policy. And when you impact policy, then you're engaging the power. Now, who am I talking about here? Who's that power? If we're trying to gain power, who are we engaging in power? The power to be is the folks that have already set the policies in place, right? So we're talking about legislators, we're talking about city council members, right? And so when we gain power to impact policy, to engage power, it is to shift the narrative and perception. We want to tilt that theory of consent. We want to tilt that whole triangle to where you no longer see us as the worst days of our life for the rest of our life, right? You begin to see us as someone that is proactive about doing something about the thing over which they have control. And the thing that which we have control and that what we've done is shift the perception and the narrative of, it's not just about folks need jobs. Y'all know that, right? Y'all know Fair Chance Hiring is more than just that, right? Y'all know it's about once I have a job, that means I have a sense of being a human again. There's a sense of dignity. There's a sense of being a father again. You see, when you come out of prison, you can't go apply for the job the same way. I just can't keep trying, right? There's a method to it. We got to be a little strategic about it. When I get married, there's a difference between having a conviction and not having a conviction. When you're a father, it's different. When you're a mother, it's different because you're still navigating the criminal justice system. And that criminal justice system is always putting a flavor on that relationship, right? So this is how we did it. Transformative organizing is what we call it. Directly.
I have a question.
Yes.
A short statement. You can't get a job without an address, and it's sure hard to get an address without a job.
Or ID.
Or ID.
Or ID.
So she has hit on a very important aspect. So employment is mandated on parole. So is an address mandated on parole. So if you can't find employment, how likely are you to find an address? Or are you going to probably hook up with somebody that has a home and an address? So you get into an unhealthy relationship, right? And that unhealthy relationship most oftentimes produces a child, right? And so now you're not only in an unhealthy relationship, but you've produced a child and you're on parole, right? Because you couldn't get employment to have a home. You understand what that does? So there's all types of paradigms that you encounter simply because you don't have access to opportunity. I'm speaking from experience. Is why I lined that up right now, because I'm paying child support for children that I was the primary caretaker because I couldn't find employment. And I spent 2 years fighting for custody, and they took custody of my kids because I was behind in child support. They gave me a choice. You either go to jail or pay your child support. So it's different when you're navigating life with this scarlet letter of conviction. So transformative organizing. What do I mean by transformative as opposed to reformative? When you transform something, it doesn't look the same when you're done with it. Austin politics doesn't look the same after we got done with it, right? So we involved directly impacted people, but we involved business owners that were already hiring people who were formerly incarcerated. They were already practicing it. They didn't have to legislate morality because that they were already practicing it. And then there was the general public, you guys, right? People who may have had a family member, people who may know somebody. They're like, you know what? I believe folks deserve a fair chance. And we had Greg Kassar. There's always a champion involved, right? Somebody that's part of the power structure, somebody that cares, somebody that realizes that it takes them to push the needle. And Greg Kassar was that person that decided that people deserved a fair chance, chance at employment. And we used the media. We used the media to our advantage. We used press conferences. We used the paper, and we did direct actions. How many of y'all saw an article at some point about fair chance hiring? Right? Yeah. And so that was part of our strategy. Just like Trump is using the media, so did we. But we we had to define what wins means, right? Now, this was when we passed the ordinance, right? But there were a lot of wins along the way. There were a lot of wins that even if we didn't get here, we still celebrated because we organized people who were directly impacted. We got businesses aware of discrimination tactics. We got people who had never been involved in politics. Those are wins. And when you're organizing, one of the things is to set up wins along the way, because if this doesn't happen, you still need people to feel like this. You understand that? You still got to have people feeling like this, even if you don't win. And every step of the way, this is how we felt. because we're having conversations that have held us back our entire time on parole. And now we got people saying, you're right. You should do something about that, right? Mm-hmm. You can stop anytime you want.
Shh, let the haters.
But haters gonna hate. And so what I mean by this is even when you are doing the right thing, you're gonna have somebody saying that you're doing the wrong thing.
So I'll talk about Workman. So Mr. Workman, Paul Workman, is at the Capitol, and this was like my very first time going into the Capitol and speaking to representatives on my behalf and on behalf of other people. Mr. Workman felt that we shouldn't tell the government or tell private employers how they should hire people. So I got a meeting with him, and I went in along when I was a reentry advocate fellow with the Austin Travis County Reentry Roundtable. I had a meeting with him, and I sat down, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. So the night before, I was like writing a whole bunch of stuff out to explain how I felt. When I came to Austin, I had a very, very good pay. The job I told you that didn't have the 7 years on there, right? I got terminated from that job after working my way up from the receptionist under the CEO because of my criminal background. So I had that story to share with him, to tell him that, look, I got a very good paying job. I went to work every day. I was hiring doctors. I was hiring nurses, dealing with patients every day. And after 3.5, almost 4 years, they terminated me, not because of my work ethic, but because of my criminal background, which at that time was like 22 years ago. And so he was saying, you still don't have a right to tell anybody how they should hire. And we're saying, we're not telling them how to hire. We're just saying, give a person an equal opportunity to find a job. I would rather have a person with a criminal background living next door to me that have a full-time stable employment than one living next door to me, and he's breaking into my house because he's trying to survive to support his family. So Workman, and we fought super, super hard with Mr. Workman, but still our work was not unheard. So I don't know if you follow how bills are read and passed through the legislation, but our first read was in February the 20th, and as you can see, there are several steps. It has to be referred, it was referred to the business and industry. Then it was scheduled for the hearing. And I did a public hearing. I went to that hearing and I shared my story because I felt like my voice was important. Because I'm an African American woman with a violent crime, sentenced to a violent crime, and been on parole. So I felt like my voice will be the voice not only for me, but for other people. So I spoke, and I was really nervous, I'm going to tell y'all, because I felt like it was judge and jury again, but I had to get my point across. I had to let my voice be heard. So then as you see, it goes down. It went to the pending committee, and then it was considered for a formal meeting, just all these various steps that bill had to go through. And then we also had people, not only myself, but we had folks that parents has been incarcerated or uncles have been incarcerated. Those folks came out and their voices was heard as well.
Just a little nuance on that. Y'all know the Texas Ledge is made up of 150 reps, right? 76 of those are Republicans. Every Republican in the state legislature signed off on this bill. Every Republican. Every Republican senator signed off on this bill. Y'all ready?
Ready? Are you? And we won. Again. See my nice picture right there? So on this picture are directly impacted people. Letting their voice be heard, fighting for the rights of others, fighting for the right to have a job, a simple job. When we look at it, we think that, okay, everybody have a job, we can pay our house, pay our house notes, pay our car notes, and just live happily ever after. But, so let me ask you a question. How many of you have done something wrong when you was a teenager? Okay? A lot of hands showing in here. So imagine that's magnitude as an adult, and it's held in front of you for the rest of your life, and you cannot get past that. That one simple mistake that you made that you regret, that's going to hold you back for the rest of your life. That's how it is when we're not able to have a job. That's how it is when we're not able to buy our own homes. That's how it is when we can't even go rent a simple apartment. And so fighting for these things is super, super important for everybody and for the community to get involved as well.
And speaking of community involvement, we are now launching a couple of initiatives where we're asking folks to join us. The first one is going to be on July 25th. We're going to be at St. John's. And we're asking folks to come out so we can hear your voice, so we can hear what are your concerns that we need to be addressing as community activists, as we need to be addressing as nonprofits. We have an effort called Decarcerate ATX, and we also have Texas Advocates for Justice. And we're going to be meeting at the St. John's Event Center from 6:30 to 8:30, and that's going to be on the 25th of July, right? And then we're going to do another one in August 26th, I believe. We'll hand out some flyers to you. But the most important part that we want to kind of leave you with is this. It's the disenfranchisement from employment. It's the disenfranchisement from housing. It's the disenfranchisement from politics. It's the disenfranchisement from social agility. And these are the things that folks are expected to overcome in this pursuit of normalcy. You're expecting someone that's done 25 years in prison that's never seen a cell phone to apply for a job on his phone. You're asking folks that had learned how to read in prison to come home and figure out how to navigate an online job application. And then you're wondering why that person returns to using drugs, because he doesn't have this type of network. It wasn't until I met people with my background, people that had been through those cages, people that had done the same thing that I had done to get over those barriers, is when the light began to crack in. So what I'm saying is that the people who have been to prison, when they engage with other people who have been to prison, not only are we able to build power, but we're able to see our issues through a lens that though you may care, you're just not able to see it through, right? And with that being said, I'm sorry, I was trying to make music. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have a
Okay. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we are circumscribed by that 15 minutes. I know it worked out really well, and I'm sure even after the 15 minutes, if you would be willing to stay behind, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. So, but we will stop taping in about 15 minutes. So I'm sure Peggy Morton has a question. If you'll stand up and say your name, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Peggy Morton. Thank you both for speaking today, and I think it takes a lot of courage to come up here and share your story, but as you know, it's powerful. I'm really glad to hear that it sounds like you both got some good education in the prison. What's stopping these prison companies, particularly the for-profit prison companies, from teaching job skills and getting involved in this same issue? I mean, I'm glad you're not waiting around for them, but if you want to address that.
Okay, so my incarceration wasn't here. My incarceration was in another state. So school was offered there. But they have since cut the program for funding issues. Here in Texas, I'm fighting against them building another jail for women. I would prefer them to use that money to do some programmings here. I talked to some people over TDCJ. They have programs, but most of their programs are geared toward men. They're not geared toward women. Like they have, I mean, I'm not saying that a woman don't want to be a plumber or do some engineering or do some construction work. I'm not saying that, but a lot of the programs are cut that I'm aware of is due to funding.
Just to answer that kind of sort of, so for me, that's almost a philosophical question, right, of why don't they want folks. And obviously it's because the less trained people are, the less prepared people are to deal with employment, the better chances are they to recidivate, which means they have a continuing population that they can count on. So do I believe there's a dearth of education made available purposefully? Absolutely. Do I think there's certain training for certain jobs that create a certain class of employer? Absolutely. Do I think that prisons are designed specifically to create a population that is less advantaged and are inclined to come back in? Absolutely. And do I think legislators are involved in that process through the lobbying efforts of ALEC? Absolutely. There's a reason why we spend over $640 million a year on private prison contracts. Not because they keep people out, it's because it keeps us in the loop when it comes to making money on incarceration.
If you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Wayne Johnson.
Taj.
Hey, yes, I am also a member of Taj. I'm a very proud member. The thing I wanted to say was that, are you going to hold that? Or? Okay, awesome. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. Give me that. No, okay. So the thing that I wanted to speak to, and thank you guys so much. Like, I really look up to you guys. It really means a lot to me that you do all that you do. So I'm a justice-involved peer recovery coach. So what that means is I have lived experience as a formerly justice-involved individual, and also I'm a person in recovery. I have 4.5 years of sobriety right now. And thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, guys. So the thing I wanted to speak to is about the experiential and lived experience approach of helping individuals that are trying to reenter society. I work both with people that are justice involved, like I said, and also people that have recovery or trying to be in recovery. Either they're trying to get into it, or they're already into it, or they're coming out of the treatment process, or they're coming back into society through prison. And, I have to say, man, there is nothing like helping a person when you have that experiential knowledge. And, the agency I work for, which is a nonprofit called Communities for Recovery over at the Austin State Hospital, we actually helped, and you guys know Reggie and Tasha, and a lot of people, and maybe you guys too, I don't know, but we worked really hard to get a bill passed that you guys got one too, that was to get Medicaid to bill for peer services. Now, peer is a person with lived experience that works with people that are in recovery, justice involved, these kind of things. And I just want you to know that we're able to show that it's working. That experiential knowledge, is what's working with people that are trying to reenter society. And so I just wanted to, give a shout out to you guys and let you know I appreciate you, and let's keep doing this thing, man.
Amen. Thank you.
So Wayne and I, this is the first time we've met, but I'm a probation officer, and I ran into a real issue out at the jail. It was kind of a catch-22 out at the jail. And Wayne was able to help the person get out of jail and into treatment because it was beyond me, and I was really grateful. So, yes, more linkages.
That's
I
dope.
have a question back
That means good.
If you'll raise your hand, I'll bring you the microphone.
Hello, I'm Richard Halpin. I'm a member of this church, and I want to thank you both for being here.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you for telling your story so beautifully, so with such truth and courage. A nuance. I heard you say that we use the media like Donald Trump uses the media. I don't think you do. I think, brother, you use the media, and sister, you use the media to tell the truth.
Yeah.
You use the media to tell stories of people that are real life. You use the media to change the world for the good. That man uses the media to lie. He uses the media to distort our world. And it is he and the kind of people that he represents that build these prisons for profit.
Absolutely.
That take people's lives and eat them up for their own greed and their own self-aggrandizement. I, like you, have worked in this field for a long time, and I just want to make sure everybody understands, passing a bill at the legislature about the kind of work you've passed a bill at is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's not just something you got done. To get Republicans to sign up on that bill, to get Democrats to get elected officials to do the right thing, as you did, is a miracle. And I want everybody to really give these folks. So the point I wanted to make, though, in addition to that, was you said you were looking for people to give us things to work on.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that fills the prison pipeline is the way young people are treated in schools.
Absolutely.
And the way young people are treated in poverty. So I would urge you to continue to work with young people who've been pushed out of school, have pushed into the prison pipeline, and to stop that dangerous and destructive dynamic of our community.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone in here familiar with Jump On It? So Jump On It happens every Wednesday. It used to happen at Givens Park, and it's specifically designed to engage underprivileged black and brown youth. They bring concerts and stuff like that, right? Well, because they want to turn Givens into a dog park, they moved the event out to Travis Exposition Center. And the reason why I bring that up is because every Wednesday we're going out there and talking to young men, emerging leaders, about social justice issues, about black people issues, and just becoming aware of their place in this world. And so we agree with you that the school to prison pipeline is one of the fast tracking the brightest and the best gifts that our communities have to offer into a system that is literally a physical and mental abattoir. And it continuously eats up our children, and it eats up our youth, and it eats up our women. It's eating up our black women at a faster rate, and it's eating up our black men. And I think we have to be cognizant, and though we are trying to save our children, that we have to be aware that our black women and our brown women are being churned into this human grist mill.
So I'm Becky Halpin, and I'm deeply moved by your stories. Thank you for sharing them. I participate with Inside Books. It sends books to prisoners, and I think from the letters we get, it really drives home the point that it's so hard to exist in prison, and it's made doubly hard, I think, in Texas, because they're not providing stimulation and education. I mean, what a perfect place to get those things, and yet it's just completely lacking. My question is, have you heard any stories yet now that Ban the Box is in place and this other legislation is in place? Are you beginning to get any feedback, any trickle back that this is having an effect?
We asked for that. We know that there were some claims filed of folks that wasn't able to get a job, but we asked for the statistic of those that have received the job since Ban the Box has been in play. Do you know anything other than that?
Yes, but I want to go back to what she said about prison being the best place to get that kind of education.
It's not.
No. We don't want folks in prison, though it makes sense that would be. We just think that there's another place beside prison to educate folks, right? So that's in here or there. No. In actuality, it took them 2 years to implement the rules on fair chance hiring. So there were 2 complaints filed, but they had to dismiss the complaints because there were no rules in place. So the rules just went into place in April. And I apologize because I usually start off by telling you I'm an abolitionist to give you a baseline of where my thinking is, and I don't believe in criminal justice reform. I believe in completely abolishing that system, and we start all over again, right? And I apologize for that. I should have started with that. But yes, to answer your question, we expect now that the city has made an effort to work with the stakeholders who were involved with the passing of the ordinance in a way that they hadn't previously, and we're excited about what the future looks like in doing outreach and doing some events with the city around fair chance hiring and know your rights.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left if there's any more questions. getting my exercise today. We can meet halfway.
She does want to hold it. Hi, I'm Erin Walter. Thank y'all for being here. And I may have missed this when I had to run out and talk to my kids, but did you, what our next steps are, what you need us to put out there in the community for me as a minister, what you want me to be preaching? I serve at the YMCA of Austin, and we do have peer support for recovery. We have some pro bono peer support recovery, so amen to that. But things that we can, continue to put forth into the community, love to support your next steps.
Cool. Well, we have some flyers that we're passing out, and we would love for you guys to come out to St. John's and meet us in the community. And we're going to do some base building. And what's the day we're going to do the ledge training? In the fall.
Yeah.
In the fall, we're looking at doing a convening for a ledge training, so we'll put out some information when we get a permanent date. We're looking at September 28th and 29th or October 5th and 6th. And so when we get a firm date, we'll put some flyers out so you guys can come and get a base training at the ledge and help us out, do some campaigning.
July 21st, we're having a new member Taj orientation. So if you are directly impacted, and what do I mean by that? If you've been harmed by crime, or if you've committed a crime, or if you've done any sort of incarceration, or you have a loved one, or if there's someone in your family, you are eligible to be a member of Taj. We're doing a new member Taj training on July 21st. I want to invite you out. The pastor asked what she'd be preaching about, a heart for justice. And we're talking about fasting on Mondays, right? We're talking about fast for justice. So if you are normally impatient, on Mondays you'll be patient. If you normally walk past a homeless person, on Mondays you'll give them something. So we're going to fast against the things that we are normally gluttonous with. And it doesn't necessarily attach itself to food. Moral Mondays, right? So beyond that, if you can just, we would be remiss if we did not ask you guys to go to grassrootsleadership.org. One of the ways that we're able to fight this mission is with help. We need your help. We got a lot of folks working against us, and they have a lot of money in a big machine. So thank you all. Y'all
Thank
give
you
yourselves
so
a
much.
round of applause.
Yeah, thank you so much.